When someone goes missing, we put our trust in the police to do their best to find them. But when a young woman vanished in 2010, she was failed by the very system that was supposed to protect her. This is the Case Remains podcast, episode 23, The Unsolved Murder of Amber Tuccaro. It was a cold January night in 1990 when Vivian Tuccaro, or Tootsie, met her daughter for the first time. She drove the 750-mile journey from Fort Chip, a hamlet in northern Alberta, Canada, to High Level, where the newborn baby girl, just 3 days old, was waiting. The young girl would become the youngest of 5 siblings in the Tuccaro household, the others all boys. Paul was the oldest, followed by Billy Joe, Conrad, and Justin. Vivian and her husband had always wanted a girl, but unable to have any more children, having a daughter was seemingly off the cards, until a cousin offered to let them adopt her baby. The couple drove through the night to bring their little girl home, and the Tuccaro family was finally complete. The Tuccaros lived together in Fort Chip, where they'd been residents for a number of years, and all 5 of the children attended the Athabasca Delta Community School. Unfortunately, when Vivian and her husband decided to separate, the family's life was thrown into turmoil. The children's father moved away, and the Tuccaro siblings had to work together to keep the household going, from cooking and cleaning to looking after their baby sister, who they had always doted on. Amber grew from a clever, confident child to a happy-go-lucky and family-oriented young woman. Amber spent some time living with her brother Paul and his family, and enjoyed spending time with her nieces and nephews, sharing her love of music and dance with them. She was close with her mother Vivian, and they would never go more than 2 days without speaking to each other. Amber would go on to become a devoted mother to her own son, a baby boy that she called Jacob. At the time of her disappearance, she and Jacob, who was 14 months old, primarily lived with Vivian while Amber looked for a place of her own. She had been back and forth between her mother's and Unity House, a women's shelter in Fort McMurray, where she was getting support and resources in finding a new home. It was there that she befriended a woman with whom she planned a 2-day trip to Edmonton, the capital of Alberta. When Vivian returned home to find that Amber and her friend had purchased plane tickets, she was immediately concerned, even more so when she found out that she planned to take her grandson along for the trip. Vivian didn't think that Amber knew her friend well enough to be taking off with her into the city, let alone with Jacob in tow. She tried to convince Amber not to go, or at the very least to leave Jacob in her care. But with Amber being 20 years old, there wasn't much more she could do. On August 17th, 2010, Vivian saw the 3 off in a cab to the airport, never imagining that her daughter would never make it home. To save money, Amber, Jacob and her friend opted to spend the night in a Nisku hotel, just a short distance away from Edmonton Airport, with plans to head into the city the following day. But for reasons that are unclear, the next evening, Amber left Jacob in the care of her travelling companion so she could go to the city alone. With no transportation of her own, Amber decided to hitch a ride into Edmonton, getting into the vehicle of an unknown male between 7:30 and 8 p.m. When Amber didn't return to the hotel the next day, her concerned friend called her mother Vivian, who subsequently called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or RCMP. Vivian, too, had been worried about Amber. They had been in contact via text throughout the day, but her daughter had stopped responding as the day turned into evening. When she heard that Jacob wasn't with her, she knew that something was wrong. It wasn't like Amber to leave him with someone else for such a long period of time. But when Vivian called the Leduc RCMP, they told her that she would have to wait 24 hours to file a missing persons report. Amber was probably just out partying somewhere, they said, and would probably return home soon. Vivian felt uneasy about their response, but seeing as they were the police, she followed their guidance, officially filing a report the next day on the 20th of August. She also received a call from the friend that Amber had travelled with, letting her know that she was taking Jacob to child services in Edmonton. Vivian made her way to the city to start the process of getting her grandson returned to her, trusting that the RCMP would be doing everything they could to find her daughter. Unfortunately, as the Tuccaros were soon to find out, their initial investigation left a lot to be desired. Amber wasn't put on the missing persons list for a number of days, and was even mistakenly removed shortly after she disappeared. Despite telling Amber's family that she would only be removed from the list if they were 100% certain that she had been seen, Amber was taken off the page after someone said that they'd seen her at a gas station. An entire month passed before her information was put back on, a month that could well have provided some vital information in the case. Not only that, but the family weren't even informed. Vivian only realised the page was no longer there through her own internet searches. Less than 3 weeks after Amber disappeared, a media relations officer with the RCMP was quoted in a local newspaper as saying, "We don't have any reason to believe that she is in any danger. We know that she is in the Edmonton area." This had the effect of not only minimising the significance of Amber's disappearance, but also meant that the already scarce media coverage of the case dwindled down to almost nothing. Amber's belongings were allegedly left in the hotel room for several weeks before the police collected them. However, a failure to follow the proper protocol led to Amber's suitcase of things being destroyed, any potential evidence being destroyed along with it. Even if they didn't bring any leads to the case, Amber's belongings had great sentimental value to her family, and given the choice, they would have had the suitcase returned to them. According to an independent report on the investigation several years later, officers also failed to properly locate and interview the friend that Amber had gone travelling with, despite her being one of the last people to see her alive. Even when the woman was in custody for an unrelated charge later that year, the officers didn't make any attempt to interview her in regards to Amber's case. But it wasn't just her who they failed to interview straight away. The first interview, with Vivian, wasn't conducted until 4 months after Amber disappeared. The same report found that the investigation was neither reasonably monitored nor properly supervised, and that no measures were taken to appoint an experienced investigator to coordinate and guide their search. The final finding of the report was that the search for Amber Tuccaro was wholly inadequate. And so sadly, but perhaps unsurprisingly, the year that followed the young woman's disappearance went by with almost no progress being made. In October of 2011, more than a year after Amber vanished, the CARE team took over the case from the Leduc RCMP. CARE is an RCMP task force that was established in 2003. It was started in response to the discovery of the remains of 9 women in rural areas of Edmonton in the 15 years that came before it, a disproportionate number of whom, like Amber, were Indigenous. Since then, the project's role has expanded to, as their website states, investigating and reviewing files of missing vulnerable persons. The following year, CARE took the unusual step of releasing significant audio evidence related to Amber's case. In fact, it was the first time in Canadian history they had released an audio recording to the public in an investigation of this kind. What you're about to hear is an excerpt from a phone conversation Amber had in an unnamed vehicle on the evening of August 18th, 2010. The man you hear in the background has never been identified.
Where are we by?
We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
We're heading north of Beaumont. Yo, where are we going?
Just
No, this is a... Are you f***ing kidding me? You better not take me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez. Yo, we're not going in the city, are we?
We're going
No, we're not.
yes,
Then where the f*** these roads going to?
to 50th Street.
50th Street. Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Yo, where are we going?
50th Street.
50th Street.
50th Street.
East, right?
Just over town. Bravo.
The recording was released on August 28th of 2012, 2 years after Amber was last seen. At the time, the RCMP did not reveal who the person was on the other end of the phone or how they had obtained the recording. However, it later transpired that Amber was on the phone to her brother, who was being retained at the Edmonton Remand Centre at the time. The centre had begun to record all outgoing calls by inmates earlier that same year. The audio was cut from a phone call that lasted roughly 17 minutes, and the content of the rest of the call has never been disclosed. Just a few days after the recording was released to the public, police found new evidence in the case. Unfortunately, it was the kind of evidence that Amber's family had been dreading since the day she disappeared. A group of horseback riders were out in a rural area near Leduc when they discovered something strange in the grass. They called the local police department immediately to tell them they thought they'd found a human skull. That same day, the skull was formally identified as that of Amber Tuccaro. Around 40 RCMP officers searched the area, along with dog teams and civilian search crews. Numerous other bones were reported to have been found, although these were later confirmed to be animal remains. If any other evidence was found at the scene, it hasn't been made public, and Amber's cause of death has never been revealed. On the audio, you can hear the driver saying that they are driving towards 50th Street, but Amber's remains were found in a rural area of Rollyview. To reach Rollyview from Amber's hotel in Nisku, the driver would have had to have gone in completely the opposite direction. Not only that, but the drive from Nisku to Rollyview is approximately 17 minutes, almost the exact length of time of Amber's phone call from her brother. It's not clear how long the RCMP had the recording before they released it to the public, although Amber's family were made aware of its existence several months before it was released. Since the recording was made public, at least 3 women have come forward saying that they recognise the voice on the tape. 2 of the women told CBC News that they'd reported the man to the RCMP with their suspicions. One called in the same year Amber was found, and the other reported it in 2015. The RCMP told CBC News that they had looked into the man, but had ruled him out as a person of interest in Amber's murder. Now, with their worst fears confirmed, the Tuccaro family were increasingly troubled by the investigation into Amber's disappearance. In March of 2014, Vivian lodged an official complaint against the RCMP to the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission, whose findings were referenced earlier in this episode. As well as the Commission's findings, the report outlined 17 recommendations for the RCMP, designed to help improve future missing persons investigations and avoid the kind of mistakes and carelessness that took place during the search for Amber Tuccaro. As well as training, policy amendments, and process reviews, the Commission also recommended that the RCMP issue a public apology to Vivian and her family, which was given by Deputy Commissioner Curtis Zablocki in July of 2019.
Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today as we gather on Treaty 6 territory, traditional land, and home for many Indigenous people. Before I begin, I want to express my deepest sympathy for your family's loss. Please know that the RCMP remains completely committed to searching for the person responsible for taking Amber from you. I'd like to commend you for the courage to talk about your difficult experiences searching for Amber, your daughter, sister, and mother. Amber was a beloved member of your family and of the community. I fully acknowledge that in the early days of our investigation into Amber's disappearance, that it required a better sense of urgency and care. We agree with the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission that in 2010, our Leduc Detachment's initial missing person investigation was not our best work and was not in line with our established practices, procedures, and guidelines. At the beginning of this investigation, the RCMP was not the police service we strive to be. On behalf of the RCMP, I am truly sorry. Although the past cannot be changed, it is important to remember and learn from it. This is necessary in order to move forward. I can tell you with confidence that the RCMP is listening and learning from families such as yourselves. This includes building trust with family members by providing timely communication and requiring more oversight from senior management teams. We are committed to addressing the recommendations laid out in the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission's report. I've personally reviewed each recommendation, several of which we had already implemented when the report was received in 2018. I'm grateful that your family has continued a dialogue with us over the years, however strained and difficult it may have been for you. I'm committed to continue to hear your truths, heal, and improve upon the relationship we have with you as we strive for the same goal, finding justice for Amber.
Though there was some satisfaction in finally having her family's pain acknowledged, for Vivian Tuccaro, the apology was a case of too little, too late. She felt that the apology was only given as a result of the Commission's recommendation and that it hadn't come from a place of sincerity. Her feelings were bolstered by the fact that Zablocki had left the press conference while she and Amber's brother Paul were answering questions, apparently because it had overrun and he had another meeting to attend. 2 months after the apology was made, the Tuccaros filed paperwork to exhume Amber's remains for DNA testing, harbouring doubts that they even belonged to her. No DNA testing was done at the time of the body's discovery, and were identified as Amber through dental records alone, an identification which was done at the scene on the very same day the remains were found. Knowing that identifications can often take days, if not weeks, to determine, the Tuccaros had always found this suspicious and had asked for DNA testing to be carried out. In response, the RCMP sent a medical examiner to Fort Ship so he could explain to the family why they were sure that Amber's dental records gave them a positive identification. But the Tuccaros believed that there are some discrepancies between her records and the dental fillings that were found in the skull. It remains to be seen whether any DNA testing will now be taking place. With a case that's now almost a decade old, and an investigation that didn't get the care and attention it deserved, the road to justice for Amber Tuccaro is sadly sure to be a long one. The key, it seems, lies with a mysterious voice on Amber's last call, taking her somewhere she didn't want to go. The Tuccaros can only hope that maybe one day the right person will hear it. Thank you for listening to episode 23 of the Case Remains podcast. The recording of Amber's last call is available on the RCMP website. I urge you to take one moment out of your day to share it on your social media pages. And if you do have any information regarding the case, you can call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS or go on their website, crimestoppers.ab.ca. If you'd like to keep up to date with the podcast, you can follow us on social media at Case Remains, or you can visit the website www.caseremains.com, where you'll find write-ups on missing persons cases and unsolved mysteries. Until next time, stay safe.